Atheist Nomads, episode 241, The Sun, Moon, and Rod.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin. Lauren is sleeping. She didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night since the baby kept waking up. And we are joined via Zencaster by Bridget Fitch from Holy Crap, the Vlogcast. Holy crap, Bridget, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And you have the distinction of being one of the people who saved Atheist Nomads back in 2013. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're welcome, and I'm glad that I could help.
And for those of you who don't know or haven't been listening that long, she was one of the people that helped support the show when I got fired in 2013, and helped keep all the bills getting paid. Not my personal bills, but the show's bills, and help make it so that the show was able to continue.
I'm glad you're still here. I would have missed you. Yeah. And congratulations on episode 241. That's awesome.
Yeah. We just keep making episodes. So give us a brief rundown on Holy Crap, the Vlogcast.
What Holy Crap, the Vlogcast is, it's a weekly show done on Google Hangouts at 11 p.m. Central, midnight East Coast, every Saturday night. And we talk about current events, political news, things going on in other countries besides the U.S. And we have co-hosts that are from Canada, the UK, France, a bunch of different people who get together and talk about whatever we want to talk about. And a lot of times we try to stay on topic, but it veers off into some weird territory.
All right.
And I've been doing that about 2 years. And we just completed our 200th episode last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move into Dustin Off the Degree. And since we're going to be talking again about the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary, thought it might be useful to talk about the organization that has splintered off from the Unification Church. On Easter morning 1935, Jesus appeared to a 16-year-old Korean boy and asked him to finish his work that was cut short by the crucifixion. Or at least that's what Mun, later known as Sun Moon Moon, would convince his followers had happened. Moon lived in northern Korea until he was captured and imprisoned by the communist government of North Korea in 1946. During the Korean War, he was freed by UN forces and founded the Unification Church on May 1, 1954 in Busan. The Unification Church has its own scripture, the Divine Principle, which was first published in 1945, but lost during the Korean War. A second version of it, Explanation of the Divine Principle, was published in 1957, and the final and most popular version, Exposition of the Divine Principle, was published in 1966. And it kind of has the distinction of being a scripture that reads more like a systematic theology, and also has the distinction of, like Mormons, being a Christian group with its own scripture. Their main doctrines are that God is the creator and has combined masculine and feminine nature, which is the source of all truth, beauty, and goodness. They interpret the world as give and take actions and a subject and object position. So who's giving and taking, and who is the actor and who is the recipient of that action. They believe that the purpose of humans is to return joy to God, and they have a major emphasis on family and marriage, believing that true families are the way to create world peace. They are very well known for doing mass baptisms and mass marriages. And by mass, we're talking, in some cases, tens of thousands. And they don't care if you're already married. They'll go ahead and let you take part in another marriage. I think it's with the same person, but yeah, they're happy to do these massive weddings. Further distinguishing them from mainstream Christianity is a belief that Jesus should have gotten married, and that Moon held Messiah status, either as the second coming of Jesus or as just the continuation of Jesus's work. They also do their best to keep most of their theology secret, so it's not surprising that most Christians believe them to be a cult. In 1958, missionaries were sent to Japan, and in 1959 to the U.S. Factories were set up in Korea and Japan for a number of enterprises, including arms manufacturing, to help fund the church's activities. And yeah, we're world peace is a big part of their name and everything they do, and yet they made arms. Since then, they have continued to expand around the world, and in 1971, Moon moved to the U.S. In the 1970s, the Moonies, as Moon's followers are commonly known, were accused of brainwashing, and some members were forced into deprogramming by family members. In 1987, the American Psychological Association rejected brainwashing claims made against Moonies and other new religious groups, stating that the conclusions cannot be said to be scientific in any meaningful sense. It's basically it was mainstream Christians trying to get people to hate and fear the Moonies and other groups like them. The Unification Church became involved in politics in the 1970s and 80s, notably supporting Nixon during Watergate, being very anti-communist, at least somewhat anti-Semitic, and starting a news media empire called News World Communications to promote conservative political views. And among their holdings, now under a wholly owned subsidiary of the Unification Church, is the Washington Times. Now, this is not to be confused with the Washington Post, which is owned by Amazon's Jeff Bezos. In 1977, the Subcommittee on International Organizations of the Committee on International Relations of the United States House of Representatives found that the Unification Church coordinated public relations efforts with the South Korean National Intelligence Service in an effort to gain influence in the United States. In 2008, Moon appointed his oldest son, Hoon-Young-jin Moon, to be chairman of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, one of the main organizations of the Unification Church. He also appointed his daughter In Jin Moon, president of the Unification Church of the United States. And then after Moon's death in 2012, the movement splintered, with his widow Hak Ja-han Moon claiming to be the new Messiah and taking over the Family Federation. Hoon-Young-jin Moon also claimed to be the new Messiah and founded the Family Peace Association. And Moon's youngest son, Hoon-Young-jin Sean Moon, also claimed to be the new Messiah and founded the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary, which we will talk about more after the break. But yeah, Moonies they're bizarre. Have you ever run into any of them?
I have not.
I have once, and it was, this was a few years back. It was in Boise, and yeah, this guy showed up at the place I was working, and it took us a long time to figure out what he was doing. Couldn't tell if he was trying to sell stuff, if he was wanting to donate, or if he was trying to proselytize. Like, it took a long, long time to get him nailed down, and finally, discovered he was a Moonie, and he was, I don't think he even knew for sure what he was doing. It was just weird. It was a weird experience.
I saw a group of them at an airport once, or at least I think that they were, but we had been told, all through my childhood that they were an extremely dangerous cult and to stay away from them, so I just veered as far away from them as I could get.
Now, were they bald, wearing yellow robes?
I don't remember.
Because if that's the case,
this
it was
like
Hare
back
Krishna.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a Hare Krishnas.
Okay.
These people were selling flowers, and this was back in the mid-'80s, and they were handing out some pamphlets, but I'm not sure what they were wearing, to be honest. I don't remember. But I don't think it was yellow robes. That doesn't stand out in my mind.
Okay, then it probably was the Moonies. And I've heard stories about them doing that. It was weird was when they came to the U.S., they had their best success around San Francisco, particularly Berkeley, and got in with the counterculture revolution.
Oh, that would have been a logical place to do it.
Right. What's so bizarre with that? Counterculture, the very liberal movement, and they were politically incredibly conservative and backing Nixon. Mm-hmm. It's just weird.
And they've pretty much been aligned with the GOP ever since.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And if you're seeing news from the Washington Times, don't trust it. That is
I know.
Political propaganda.
Yeah. I was aware that the Washington Times was extremely right-wing, but I learned something today. I wasn't aware that they owned it.
Yeah, I didn't either until I was researching this. It was, yeah, a little surprising find. They have a bunch of other newspapers, and mostly in Asia. And most Moonies are in Asia, South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines in particular.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And, the more you find out about the original group, that doesn't necessarily tell you a whole lot about the splinter, but it does at least tell you a bit about where that splinter is coming from. And with the Moonies, it is very difficult to pin them down on what specifically they're doing and what specifically they believe, because they try to keep a bunch of that, as much as they can, secret. So they mostly just end up being weird. And after the break, we'll talk about how they're also getting kind of scary. Atheist Nomads is proudly brought to you by listeners just like you. You can find out how you can become a patron at patreon.com/atheistnomads. That's patreon.com/atheistnomads. So the Unification Church's most famous ritual, of course, is mass weddings, but they also do other commitment ceremonies, such as the one that the Mooney offshoot World Peace and Unification Sanctuary in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania held last week, with hundreds of couples showing up wearing crowns and carrying AR-15 style assault rifles. The church believes these rifles to be the rod of iron in Revelation. And during the service, they drank holy wine and exchanged or renewed wedding vows. Protesters and state police were outside the church, and a school across the street bused students across town to another campus out of safety concerns. During the service, the Reverend Sean Moon prayed for, quote, a kingdom of peace police and peace militia, where the citizens, through the right given to them by Almighty God to keep and bear arms, will be able to protect one another and protect human flourishing. This is just weird and scary.
Yeah. Pace through violent weapons. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like what they're imagining is a heavily militarized police force and a bunch of Moonies walking around with assault rifles.
Not scary at all. Not scary at all.
And this seemed at first just to be in bad taste, with, the timing being right after the school shooting in Florida. But the more I look into this, this is terrifying. A crazy fringe cult is arming up for the apocalypse.
And with weapons not really designed for protection, but for mass casualties. Right. That's the only purpose they have.
They're meant for infantry. I don't see how this can end well.
I don't see it ending well at all. And I'm glad that we don't have any groups like that around my kid.
Oh, man. Moonies are everywhere. I don't know if all of them are going that route, but holy crap. And it's especially concerning considering their right-wing political affiliations. If they help spread the thought that the right to bear arms comes direct from God, it's going to be even harder to try to do anything gun control related. Oh,
I mean, yeah, especially as many Christians as we have in this nation, if they somehow get it into their head that there's a mandate from God that they must arm themselves like this. Oh, my God.
Well, and we have good historical precedents for the views of one right-leaning religious organization getting adopted by all of the others. And it's happened in our lifetime, with the Catholic view that life begins at conception getting spread across all of evangelical Christianity via the Republican Party.
Yeah. So where are the Jehovah's Witnesses when you need them most to fight back against this? They need to spread some pacifism, because this is getting out of hand.
Yeah. Now, the state of Florida has debated, passed, and then rescinded an assault rifle ban. I'm amazed it passed in the first place, but it didn't. It only lasted 45 minutes. One Republican voting against the bill was State Senator Kelly Stargell, and here's her thoughts on the matter.
It's not the weapon. It's the evil from within. And unfortunately, Senator Stewart said in the very beginning of her debate, when we say thoughts and prayers It's frowned upon. And I take real offense at that because thoughts and prayers are really the only thing that's going to stop the evil from within the individual who is taking up their arms to do this kind of a massacre. So I will continue to do the thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, she went on to then talk about a comprehensive plan she has to try to address gun violence. She wants to limit gun sales to those under 21. She wants to increase mental health services and increase the amount of armed personnel on school campuses. But ultimately...
But in my opinion, the one thing that will actually change this the most is the one thing that has become fighting words, which is to say thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Thoughts and prayers don't do a goddamn thing. That's literally inaction.
While making yourself feel like you're doing something.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do anything.
Now, with the other parts of her plan, limiting gun sales to those under 21, that's a
good idea.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. There's a number of companies that are already doing that voluntarily. There's several states that are looking at doing that. 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are more likely to commit acts of violence than those older. That's not going to stop mass shootings. It's not going to stop school shootings, but it might help. The big problem, though, with that idea is most of those young adults are getting the guns from home, from their parents. So that would have helped in this one case, but not generally. Increasing mental health services. That is a great idea. Trying to help identify people that are a threat of harm to themselves or others. That's a good idea. But nobody was thinking that this guy was a mental health risk. And the types of mental illnesses that these increased mental health services would help don't have any correlation with gun violence. So that's also not likely to help. And at least in the case of the shooting in Florida, adding more armed personnel on school campuses wouldn't have done anything because the armed cop that was already on campus waited outside. The 4 sheriff's deputies that went to back him up also waited outside. It wasn't until the next wave of police showed up that anybody actually entered the building. And by that time, he'd already killed everybody and had escaped. So I'm not convinced that's going to help.
Well, and then I don't know if you saw this in the news or not, but there was a case in Georgia of a school teacher who shot at school and was arrested. Not really sure why he was shooting, but he wanted to be left alone. And some of his students tried to come into his classroom and he locked the door. And when the principal came in there to find out what was going on, he shot at the principal.
Holy crap.
So, there's your armed teacher. You really want more like that?
Wow.
That was crazy.
Holy crap. I mean, yeah, arming teachers. Great idea.
Yeah, especially when one of them snaps for no reason. I still don't know what his problem was, but they arrested him on endangering children and several felony counts. But I mean, who knows why he decided to do that? No one knows.
Wow. And the whole arming teachers idea is you take people who are not very well trained, arm them. And when I say not well trained, I mean not well trained in using weapons to take down a shooter. So you arm them without giving them sufficient training to do what you're arming them for, and then expect them to successfully hit the person they're targeting and not everybody who's running through the halls, and hope that when the police show up, they don't shoot your teachers, and then hope the teacher doesn't just use it outside of that scenario.
Well, I mean, you do have teachers that probably would draw on students just because they're assholes. But at the same time, do you want teachers to have to be in a mindset of, today I may have to shoot one of my students?
Yeah.
And the right is always going on about fear of the police state, deep state, all this other stuff. And here they are creating the perfect police state themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be putting schools in about the same level as, armed prisons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having the kids under lockdown all the time, and talk about instilling a state of fear in the general populace. I mean, if I was a student and I was living under lockdown like that all the time, what does that do to the kids?
Mm-hmm.
And we're bringing this on ourselves. I mean, not you and me personally, but collectively, we're doing this to ourselves.
I went to a high school that was founded on fear. It was Milo Adventist Academy. It was built in the 1950s. Intended to not need to survive the decade because they were sure Jesus was going to come before then. So they built everything the last 5 years. When I was there in the early 2000s, they were having to rebuild all of the buildings because they were falling apart. And this was this little boarding school literally 5 miles from Wilderness. And that was built there intentionally with only one way on or off campus, and that's a single covered bridge, and is built there so that when the government would start, persecuting the saints, they could all run to the hills very easily. And when you're in a place like that, it gets weird. Yeah. Adding metal detectors in high schools doesn't really seem to have done anything. And yet, well, it hasn't done anything except make it feel like a less safe place. And putting resource officers on campuses, I haven't heard of any cases where a resource officer's taken down a shooter. It's the whole reason why we put armed cops on school campuses.
And all of these mass shootings that we've had lately in public places, you cannot tell me that there hasn't been at least one quote-unquote good guy with a gun that wouldn't have been able to do anything. I mean, I'm sure that people were carrying weapons, but people freeze and they can't act, and that doesn't make anybody any safer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put guns in everybody's hands, then everybody's going to start shooting everybody else, and that's definitely not safer.
Well, if you want to know what it's like in a place where everybody is armed, look at any war zone.
Yeah.
And do you really want to live in a war zone?
No.
If we want to look at a more local example, the Wild West. Almost everybody was armed in the Wild West. And you had a really good chance of getting murdered. Mm-hmm. If you piss somebody off, they'll just shoot you. People idolize the old days. They were terrible. And they're wanting to go back.
I don't get it. I don't know why they would want to go back, but they do.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right, let's go ahead and move on from that. Gail Jordan is the executive director of Recovering from Religion, and she's also running for the Tennessee State Senate in a special election. A few weeks ago, the state Republican Party chairman, Scott Golden, called on voters to reject her because she is, quote, a radical atheist. If that wasn't bad enough, on March 1, Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally went on social media and wrote, "In my 40 years in Tennessee politics, I've seen few candidates as dangerous as Gail Jordan. She is not just out of step with the majority of Tennessee on matters of policy, she is out of step on matters of value and faith. In her daily work, she directs an organization called Recovering from Religion. Most Tennesseans, whether they are strong believers or not, recognize the strength and comfort faith provides. Gail Jordan rejects faith as a positive force for good in the world. She believes faith is something from which people need to be rescued. This is not the type of person we need in the Tennessee Senate." That's just it. You can't get much worse than having government officials attacking candidates with that strong of language because of atheism.
Well, I guess because she's atheist, that's by definition makes her a dangerous radical or something. And what happened to no religious test required for office? What happened to that?
Yeah. It's in this case, it's you can have whatever test you want for elected office because every voter gets to pick what tests they'll use to vote for somebody. But to be specifically targeting a candidate for that's just wrong. If she'd been part of a small Christian group or Jewish or even Muslim, that wouldn't have been said. Mm-mm. And if she rejects faith as a positive force for good in the world, then maybe she's going to be trying to look for actions that can be done as a force for good in the world. The Tennessee state legislature exists to be that force. And that's something she could help with.
They obviously don't know what the purpose of recovering from religion is either.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for the most part, maybe they do understand it and think that's the problem. If you don't think you need the people need to recover from religion, they need to be, restored to the faith, then that would be a dangerous organization.
But not from the standpoint of a lot of these people have been traumatized because of something to do with the religion they were brought up in or their exposure to it, and they need recovering from that trauma.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I definitely agree that it is not a dangerous organization.
And I don't think they understand that, but it may be that they don't want to understand that either.
Yeah. It wouldn't exist if people didn't need help.
Right.
All right. Moving along. James Linden was convicted of drug possession and theft for stealing 5 hydrocodone pills from the clinic he was working as a pharmacist at. And he was convicted of tampering with evidence for swallowing 4 of the 5 pills when confronted by security guards. So, not a model citizen by any means. He was sentenced to a month in a substance abuse program and 2 years of probation. He's now suing because the program is Alcoholics Anonymous, which requires people to submit to a higher power, and he's an atheist. Thus, this court-ordered program violates his religious freedom. This isn't the only time when lawsuits like this have come up. If he needs help, and, if you're stealing opiates, you probably do need some help. It would seem like it would be in the court's best interest to direct that person to a program that would actually be useful and meaningful for the person in the program.
Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why they wouldn't offer some kind of a secular alternative.
Right. Man. In Boise, I've heard of cases where the drug court, which a lot of people with drug and alcohol convictions get sent to instead of the normal court system. The focus of the drug courts is treatment instead of incarceration. It's a good thing, except the people running it are Pentecostal and have a bunch of Pentecostal treatment programs where the main goal is to help you beat the addiction by finding Jesus. That's no different than this, and just as bad.
No, and actually people have sued for this and won in the past for being forced to attend a 12-step program. Yeah.
And in general, the 12-step programs aren't all that effective. Their success rates are pretty abysmal.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that part of that failure is because they start from a point of admitting you're powerless, as opposed to finding out ways that you can beat it. All right, well, we're going to take another break, and we'll be back with some feedback. We love hearing from our listeners. You can email us at contact@atheistnomads.com, tweet us at atheistnomads, send us a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com/atheistnomads, or better yet, call us and leave us a message at 541-203-0666. We might even play it on the show. You can also help us out by leaving us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast directory of choice. Got an email from Al. He started off asking for some advice on some equipment, and then said, you are doing well with the show and can easily carry an episode by yourself if you need to. Love dusting off the degree. I enjoy actual factual information about the Bible. That's what set me free from religion. Best to you and your family, Al. Thanks, Al. I was pretty confident I could handle it. I've preached and done public speaking enough times that I know that I can, I have no problem talking for long periods of time. In my preaching days, I quickly discovered that I had a hard time keeping it under 40 minutes. And I could easily go an hour. And I got down to the point of preaching without notes for an hour. What's different is live versus recorded, because recorded, I can go back and listen to it again. And I can be highly, highly critical of myself. And it's easier when it's a conversation with somebody else for me to be less critical. And continuing on with news, Kentucky has a bill, Senate Bill number 48, that would end child marriage in the state. But it's been pulled from the schedule because of lobbying from conservative Christian groups like the Kentucky Family Foundation. And you would think that making 18 the legal age for marriage would be not all that controversial, but their big concern with this is parental rights. Parental rights and marriage seem to me like two things that have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
They usually don't, but I think where they're coming from is that whole courtship thing that a lot of evangelical conservative families practice, where the children are matched up according to the parents' wishes, and it has nothing to do with what the children want. And I think it would interfere with that. I know that as a female, if I was 16, it'd be a lot easier for my dad to tell me what I had to do than if I was, say, 20 or 21.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they will go ahead and set up these courtship relationships at the age of 15 or 16. And as soon as they're legally allowed to get married, which in some states it is 16 with parental permission, they can marry them off.
Yeah.
And it would interfere with that. But is that necessarily a bad thing to interfere with? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I remember being 16. I had no business being married at that age. I don't know many 16-year-olds who do.
Uh-huh. So currently in Kentucky, if you are 16 or 17, you can get married with parental consent. If you're under 16, you can marry with the judge's permission in case of a pregnancy, even though most people think that if you're under 16 and pregnant, especially if the father is over 18, that is a crime. And forcing somebody to marry their abuser is absolutely abhorrent. Yeah. If this bill were to pass, 18 would be the legal age for marriage, and at 17, you could get married with permission of a district judge, but only if the difference between the 17-year-old and the other party is less than 4 years. So a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old would be able to get married with a judge's approval. This is to avoid what's been going on, which is 13, 14, 15-year-old girls marrying men who are much, much older. The bill would also add in other requirements, such as the judge needing to review any material looking at child abuse records involving the teen, checking for sex offender records on the adult. They need to be considering options or factors like maturity and independence of the teen, education level, domestic violence records, and the judge would not be under any obligation to approve it. This seems like a pretty much a no-brainer.
And I don't understand why they can't seem to pass something like this. But it's Kentucky.
Yeah.
If for any of your listeners from Kentucky, sorry about that.
One of the reasons why it's so important is Kentucky has the third highest rate of child marriage. Texas is first, Florida's second. Texas has changed its law to limit marriage to just adults, and Florida's considering a similar change. So if Florida successfully can pass that, then that'll leave Kentucky as the worst.
And they also have a large percentage of their population on welfare, too.
Mm-hmm. Which child marriage encourages.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. If you get married at 16, you're probably not going to be continuing at high school. And if you're pregnant at 17, you're probably not going to college. All right. Moving along. Alabama has 13 counties currently that do not offer marriage licenses. Or to be a little bit more accurate, they shut down their marriage license office. And on very, very limited cases, the probate judge might issue one. Most of these were shut down in 2015, right after same-sex marriage made it through the Supreme Court. And many people were expecting lawsuits about that, but none of them have happened. And the main reason seems to be because Alabama's marriage law says that judges may issue marriage licenses, not that they shall issue them, which means they're the only ones authorized to do it, but they are not required to. Which is a kind of a bizarre, I would say, lapse in the law. They probably used softer language because they didn't think it was necessary to do anything stronger than that. Obviously, they were wrong. So to try to fix this, a bill has passed the state Senate and the House Judiciary Committee, and it would just eliminate marriage licenses completely. Take them away from probate judges, take them away from the state in its entirety. They would be replaced with a form that the parties getting married would have to fill out to affirm that they meet the legal requirements, and then they would file a marriage contract with the probate judge's office.
And that's all because they're throwing a fit because of same-sex marriage.
Yep.
And I don't think they've thought about what this will actually do to marriage benefits to other people trying to file for government benefits or making wills and things like that, because I don't think a lot of places will recognize a contract for benefits. They want that license.
Yeah. It's one that would need to, to know how that would really pan out. We'd need to see what would happen. I would suspect most states would honor it, and the federal government would also honor it, but they wouldn't necessarily have to, unless Alabama state law ended up being absolutely specific enough that that is what marriage is in Alabama, in which case that marriage contract would have to be accepted by the government and all 50 states.
No, I'm just wondering about that, especially if you're trying to draw on your spouse's Social Security benefits and things like that, what that would do. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Hopefully nothing. One thing that is kind of concerning with it is that they are claiming that this is the state getting out of the marriage business. It'd be interesting to see how those contracts would end up looking, and whether they would actually form anything that would be equivalent to a marriage certificate.
I'd like to see if it's enforceable. If someone decides they want to get a divorce, is that contract enforceable or is it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as horrible as these places are writing legislation and catching loopholes before they pass it into law, I just don't have a lot of faith in them to do it correctly.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm thinking through the cases where I've needed to provide my marriage certificate. And it's mostly been with insurance. And how many insurance companies would any of them deny adding you on based on it just being some contract that's typed up?
They might. And you could run into a problem as far as immigration, too, if you decided to relocate to another country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it could cause all sorts of problems that people haven't really thought through.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a system that's in place that's taken a long time to get to where it is, and there's a lot of interconnected pieces with it. And if you try to radically change even just the paperwork, that can all unravel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens with this one. But by the looks of it, it'll probably pass.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, state senates tend to be harder for batshit crazy bills to get through than the House. And so if it's already made it through the state Senate and through committee in the House, it's probably going to pass. And I'd definitely be doubtful that Alabama's governor would veto it. Well, moving on to Utah, the state legislature there is currently advancing a resolution to at least limitedly acknowledge climate change and call for smarter energy policies. So that's a good thing. But at the same time, the governor is calling on people in his state to pray for snow. And why might he be doing that? It's not out of concern for the ski season. It's because this has been a dry winter and it's left the state with only about half the snowpack that it needs. Besides, when he asked people to pray for rain during the forest fires in 2012, it rained. So obviously, asking God to change the weather works. This just seems pathetic.
Well, it worked for Rick Perry, so why not? Now, it took a year and a half after the fact that he prayed for rain for it to finally happen, but it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, he actually spelled out in his official letter asking people to pray for snow. He pointed out that in that rain in the summer of 2012, and not just any rain, but gentle soaking rains without the winds that would have exacerbated the fires, the elements had in fact been tempered.
Alrighty.
Yeah, does he not get Does he not get it? Yeah, so he's calling on people to gather in their places of worship in their homes during the first week of March to thank the Creator for the extraordinary blessings that we enjoy as a state. And he goes on to write, but I would also encourage us to pray that the elements be tempered on our behalf. And thank you for all you do to meet the significant spiritual needs of the people of our great state. And this was addressed to Dear Religious Leader. That, on official state letterhead, that just feels wrong.
Well, it's Utah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thoughts and prayers. So many thoughts and prayers. And it turns out there are things that we can do to try to mitigate climate change, but ill effects such as droughts, so it's a little late on that one. So the best approach is take actions to be able to survive them, and thoughts and prayers do nothing. National Geographic has a new series coming out called One Strange Rock, and it's narrated by Will Smith. And to help promote this, they've been sending out press packets, including one that went to Gizmodo's Ryan Mandelbaum. And contained within the box was a National Geographic branded water bottle that retails for $70, and it contains a sealed vial of crystals and an instruction manual on how to prepare, quote, heavenly gem water, and claims that it is a scientifically proven process to raise the energy level of water.
Scientifically proven?
Uh-huh.
I don't think that means what they think that means.
Well, okay. So, for one, these crystals are in a sealed vial, and it even includes a warning that if that vial loses its seal and any water comes in contact with it, to not drink the water and dispose of it. So, how are the crystals actually doing anything if they're not in contact with the water? Are they just vibrating at a certain frequency that will impact the water within a few inches of it? And raising the energy level of water, that is a thing. It's called heat.
Wow.
And nobody wants lukewarm water.
Will Smith, I'm so disappointed.
Well, this isn't Will Smith's doing. He just narrated the series. This is National Geographic sending out bullshit.
Why? Why?
This is like full-on Goop level stuff.
When did they start getting into woo?
Yeah, probably about the time they were bought by Fox.
Good point.
Yeah. This is. Now, if you wanted to use the gems to raise the energy level of your water, put them in the microwave for a few seconds, put it in the bottle, pour some water in, and then you'll have some lukewarm water.
Yeah.
It's completely asinine. National Geographic used to do good stuff.
And people are probably going to buy this. That's what's so sad.
Yeah.
Probably not a lot, but some people will buy it.
Well, if it's got National Geographic seal of approval on it, it must be valid science, right? For a lot of people, they grow up with most of the science they're getting coming from National Geographic. And it pains me that they're lending their credibility to utter bullshit. All right, for our final story, South Korea has a forced conversion problem. This usually happens when family members will kidnap someone who has strayed from the usually Christian faith, and then they will take them to a convent, monastery, or church where the apostate will be confined and ministered to. In some cases, as in the case of 25-year-old Ji In-gu, they are killed. In her case, after being suffocated by her parents after escaping a monastery where she was confined for 44 days. On January 28, 120,000 people across South Korea's major cities gathered for a rally organized by the Human Rights Association for Forced Conversion to demand that pastors who take part in or encourage these kidnappings be punished. Because currently, they aren't. The forced conversions are illegal. Whoever is actually actively confining the person can sometimes face legal punishments. They don't always. And This is just insane.
I had no idea this was a problem there. Wow. I thought that we had a problem here with conversion therapy, trying to, take people who are gay and turn them quote unquote straight was bad. That's nothing compared to this.
Yeah. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this is happening in the U.S. too.
Just don't know about it, or just not legal.
Yeah. These, in a lot of places, it's all handled in camps because, a big component of gay conversion therapy is the assumption that you need, converted back to your faith. Basic premise is the whole problem is evil. And this is just, it's terrifying. A 44-day confinement, that's a long time. And if she hadn't escaped, how long would she have been there?
Probably would have never gotten out.
Man. Yeah, this is just, needs to stop.
Yeah.
If it's bad enough that there's an organization formed to address this as a major human rights issue, that sounds like something the government needs to directly address. And this would seem like a case where, being a little heavy-handed might not be a bad idea.
Well, that makes it sound like it's a pretty widespread problem, too, if it's drawing that kind of attention.
Yeah, it's not easy to get 120,000 people to rally unless it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, so that's it for this week. Bridget, where can people find you?
People can find me on Facebook under Bridget Fitch. You can find us at holycraptheblogcast.com, and you can find me on my blog at bridgetfitch2112.wordpress.com.
All right, and links to all that will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. And listeners,
thank you for having me.
Not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.